Robbie Lawler was out of control.
This is Double Cross, the murder of Robbie Lawler.
It was going to be an all-out war with him in the middle of it.
Crime World special investigation podcast based on my new book, Web of Betrayal, wherever you get your podcasts.
Okay, before we get on to this,
Yeah.
because this is complex and we're going to go through it slowly, I just have a little early Christmas present for you.
Okay,
Well, you're going to share it with me
I will.
because it was sent to me,
Okay.
but we're going to share it. And it's from Suzanne, and she had contacted me about these things. So basically, you'll never lose your keys again.
Well, no.
I'll never lose my bag again. We'll never lose our phones, our passports, our keys, or our backpacks.
Brilliant.
So you can take 2 of those out of the 4-pack.
Okay.
These are some sort of GPS signalers or something.
Look, that's what we need as we get
Finds
older.
your keys, phone, backpack in seconds. See?
There we go.
Thank you,
Brilliant.
Siobhan. Now, bad day for Conor McGregor. Bad day for James Lawrence.
And a good day for Nikita Hand. If she needed any further vindication, and I don't think she did, but this is an absolute rock solid vindication of what she has said in court. Judge Alexander Owens, who we know from the cab cases primarily, is crystal clear about what he believes the jury decided and why they decided and where the case lies.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Okay. So, first things first, John Gordon, the senior counsel for Nikita Hand, went into court this morning and he basically argued, I'm going to do this in layman's terms, that the case was taken, but that there was 2 defendants. They were McGregor and Lawrence, but they kind of came as one unit because they were both together along the way, step by step along the way, as one sort of, force or unit or whatever, that they went with each other's stories, that their story came together, their narrative came together, and therefore this cost issue should come together. And he did argue that McGregor paid the entirety of the cost to the court.
So that would be, I suppose, because there was 2 separate verdicts, James Lawrence was effectively won his case and Conor McGregor effectively lost his case. So normally what happens, as we described yesterday, is the costs follow the event. So in a normal circumstance, if somebody like James Lawrence who won his case, the costs will be borne by the person who brought the case, Nikita Hand in this case. However, the argument was made that should not follow because these 2 men, James Lawrence and Conor McGregor, were entwined in their defence. And they've said that the judge has discretion, which is a fact. The judge doesn't have, it has a discretion to make a decision. And that effectively Nikita Hand should be, Conor McGregor should pay the cost of that case and that no order should be made in relation to James Lawrence. So she should not have to pay his fees as maybe kind of regular in terms of if you lose or win,
And of course, there was particular reference to the fact that both defendants engaged the same firm of solicitors within days of McGregor's arrest in January of 2019, after Nikita Hand had made these allegations to police, and at which point there was a criminal investigation underway. So both those defendants delivered that joint defence through the same firm of solicitors, basically, which I think a lot of people in the legal world said to me that was highly unusual. They were sort of pointing that out as the case was going on, that they both had the same firm of solicitors.
Yeah, it
2 different defendants, like.
Yeah, it would be absolutely within their right to hire whoever they want, obviously, but I suppose
I don't think, the evidence that came out during the case was that essentially it was McGregor's firm of solicitors that were representing Lawrence, and that he was paying the 2 bills.
Exactly. So that tells its own tale, I suppose. And that is, I suppose, referenced by the judge. So what happened was, of course, in the aftermath of the case, James Lawrence put up a number of social media posts effectively saying he was vindicated and that the jury had believed him. And that he, we all know what the social media post says. I'm not going to bother repeating it. But the Judge Alexander Owens, I suppose, comments on this in his judgment today. And he says he made no order in relation to the costs of James Lawrence, who the jury found did not assault Hand. However, the judge said it would be completely inappropriate to award Lawrence any of his costs. He said the jury believed Nikita Hand, did not believe McGregor or Lawrence, who he said were in lockstep with each other and have remained in lockstep with each other.
So he was saying that the jury believed Nikita Hand, and she said in the witness box that she didn't believe she ever had sex with Lawrence.
Yes.
He was kind of citing that it was victorious for him that they believed he hadn't raped her.
Yeah.
But that he had had sex, which was his version. But in other words, Justice Owens is saying the jury actually believed her.
The jury believed her. He did not believed that her claim, which was that James Lawrence did not have sex with her.
At all.
Well, or at least that she doesn't remember it or doesn't believe it.
No, she said she believed that he did not have sex with her.
Exactly. So the jury believed her version of events. That's what Judge Alexander Owens has said. They did not believe McGregor's version of events, which was that he had consensual sex, and they did not believe James Lawrence's version of events, which is that he had consensual sex with Nikita Hand. Now, obviously, it's a very unusual situation and even Justice Owens says that again, it's a very unusual case in that Nikita Hand is, effectively saying, bringing that case, but also saying she didn't believe she had sex with him. He said, so he says as well that the costs will be made on a normal party-to-party basis and not on a solicitor-client basis, which is a slightly higher, but that effectively Conor McGregor will bear most of the full costs of these legal proceedings, which, pick a number out of the sky, but it's looking like something like a million euros, and that's obviously a guess.
But that's I saw a figure of 1.5 million. Were these costs not read into the court?
No, they're not.
No, they're not.
They're not.
So
they're
not
decided in
public.
the aftermath.
So it has been suggested 1.5 million. I've seen that rattling around. I've spoken to people who suggested it'd be way higher than that, but that's not matter. Let's settle on 1.5 million for the sake of it. 1.5 million would be the sort of estimated cost of Nikita Hand's case. So we're just looking at what Conor McGregor is going to be hit with. So then he has the cost for his own solicitors, which would it be the same? Another 1.5 million?
No, I think. Look, we're picking figures out of the sky.
I mean, his legal teams rather.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if we're going to settle on that figure, we're going to settle on 1.5 million being Hand's as just.
Yeah.
We're not saying it's right or wrong. We're going to settle on that for the moment. But that's only hers.
Yeah.
So he also would have the cost of his own, which has to be similar.
Has to be similar. I mean, there's a rake of costs gone in. There was medical.
Except a little bit bigger because then he has Lawrence, who had a second senior counsel. Now, she had two senior counsels, I suppose. So they have a senior counsel each.
Yeah.
Plus the junior teams. So even though Lawrence's costs are considered to be one and the same as his, the days in court, surely at the very least.
Yeah, I suppose if they have the same solicitors and the solicitors are in court, there's some diminishment in that. But I mean, it's a huge amount of money. Look, I suppose the Justice Alexander Owens says it was perfectly obvious from the jury's findings that they rejected the evidence of McGregor and Lawrence in what was a most singular and peculiar case. And he said that Mr. Lawrence was entirely successful in defending his claim, but not for the reasons he put forward in his defence. Really, really clear, stark decision. Obviously, completely contradicts the social media posts put out by James Lawrence in the aftermath of the trial. And again, we heard a lot about that.
Yes. So in relation to the social media posts, John Gordon, senior counsel, referenced them to the judge. The ones McGregor shared in particular, which he said McGregor utilised social media to disparage the court and by implication the jury's verdict. He said it was a significant text and using old language of scandalising the court. That is precisely what it was intended to do. So
he described the court, obviously, as a kangaroo court, and that was put up on social media, eventually taken down, but not after being literally viewed by millions of people around the world. So this is brought up in relation to the costs. Like, it's a slightly unusual thing. A costs hearing, effectively, the case is over. there's not new evidence can't be admitted or anything like that. But also, it's not over in that the same judge is hearing this costs hearing. So the judge, this is admitted. The social media posts were brought into the case by Nikita Hand's legal team. The judge heard a lot of evidence from both sides. McGregor's defence also described why he did it and said that people are entitled to comment on court proceedings if they're unhappy, and that's the defence they put forward. But the judge clearly wasn't impressed with the jury and his proceedings being described as a kangaroo court, and he said that after all hearing these submissions, he said he had not decided what he was going to do about the post by McGregor after the verdict.
And just slightly before he said that, because this is interesting really, and this would be a kind of a larger argument around social media. He did point out that if the editor of the Irish Times, which is obviously the paper he reads, published something similar, he would find himself, he or she actually, would find themselves in his court and be very heavily fined, because you could be fined, and you could be fined under contempt of court, or you could be jailed under contempt of court for doing that. And every year, a couple of newspapers, mostly through ill luck or get brought through for contempt of court hearings, and for relatively minor things. I mean, over the years, somebody has been facing charges. The newspapers haven't been aware of it, often in good faith, and their background is put out. And in those cases, you'll be in a newsroom, and you'll get a letter, and it says in the end, the editor, if the contempt is dealt with, could face prison. So that is what contempt of court. And that's why we have to be so careful when reporting around court. Obviously, the special criminal court in criminal cases is one thing, because there's 3 judges there and there's no jury to influence. And judges are above being influenced by the media. But if it's a court with a jury, as in this case, even with the civil case was with the jury, you have to be so careful that you only reported while the court case is active, what was said in court. You can't report anything that happens during legal argument when the jury are out, and you have to be really careful you get it right. And court reporting is a really important skill set to have for a journalist. Now, when it came to this social media posts, Mr. Justice Owens asked, should he take account of it through costs or through a hearing about concerning scandalising the court? Now, scandalising the court was something that was brought up by Nikita Hand senior counsel John Gordon. It must be some sort of an old law, or it's something similar to contempt, perhaps.
Yeah, it's an old term, I think. And though it sounds kind of outdated, it's probably a legal technical term to scandalise the court, and it would be something that exists on the Irish statute books.
It must be similar, or is contempt, is it?
Well, it's something. I mean, contempt is a specific. It's a specific legal term, I suppose, but it's just something that has been used over the years effectively, and will have been heard in court cases back, hundreds of years maybe.
So, in other words, Justice Owens was asking, was he being asked, should he fine McGregor through this costs hearing, or should he basically hear it as a scandalising the court, which contempt is a criminal offence?
But contempt can be a criminal offence. So, I mean, what he said ultimately, the judge said he had not decided what he was going to do, but he may institute proceedings for contempt of court. And he said McGregor was a very rich man who could well afford to pay a fine. He said that the jury felt under great pressure, and there was no reason to suppose that they did not decide the issues in accordance with their oaths and affirmations. So that's effectively saying that McGregor's comments, are contemptuous of the jury's decision, and that they're suggesting that they're not reached in good faith.
And that was his decision. But when he asked the question of the counsels in front of him, Gordon for Nikita Hand said he believed, it could be taken care of under costs. And then Remy Farrell for McGregor opposed that application, in many ways, but in particular around that, because he didn't believe that it was an issue for costs, obviously. And the same with Lawrence's. So the judge listens to all 3 counsels, just because one counsel, and that's kind of sometimes when you're actually reporting on these hearings, it's very important to get right who said what, because of course the counsels are suggesting to the judge what he should do or think or rule, but the judge can often say, you know what I mean, he'll listen to everything.
Of course.
So a lot of what is reported in this case is what the counsels are saying to the judge as opposed to the judge's ruling on it.
Yeah, we'd heard submissions about, what the jury believed, particularly the Lawrence case, because I suppose the McGregor lost this case, so it's relatively straightforward. But the Lawrence case is obviously the unusual aspect of it, and for the judge to make a decision about what the jury intended to say, I suppose.
Now, we didn't get a date for that contempt of court hearing, but it was the judge who made that ruling that there will be a contempt of court hearing in the future, not on this particular date. But he also, Niall, made reference to the photographs that the jury were afraid were being taken in the courtroom.
He described the jury feeling under pressure. He also said, in regards to the social media posts, that there was a tendency to allow matters like this to pass unremarked, but that led people to think they could say anything. So I suppose traditionally, matters of contempt, newspapers will be under pressure, very much aware of the rules, and we'd abide by the rules, and then you open up social media and you see people saying all sorts of things. So it's just and newspapers sometimes get newspaper people get angry that we're towing this really tight line, but people get to say whatever they want on social media. So he's obviously drawing that distinction that people shouldn't be allowed to say what they want about court proceedings, about jury decisions, and about judges and courts in general. And he said if McGregor did post the text, obviously, which went up on Instagram, it was highly irresponsible. So Mr. McGregor's counsel also said that an appeal was highly likely and no further action will be taken until the matter comes back to court on the 16th of January. So obviously there's further hearings.
Criminal contempt includes contempt in the face of the court, scandalising the court, breaches of the sub judice rules and other interferences with the administration of justice. Civil contempt is consistent defiance of a court order by positive conduct or neglect or refusal to obey an injunction. Now, there was no court order in place or refusal to obey any injunction. So it's not civil contempt they're talking about here. It's criminal contempt.
Yeah,
because it's they've mentioned this scandalising the court within the hearing today. Now, criminal contempt in that case, is that criminally investigated by the Gardaí in the same way other criminal offences are investigated? Does the DPP have to get involved here with bringing contempt to court?
Oh, normally the letter comes from the DPP for contempt proceedings, but obviously then it tends to go to court. We've seen these cases before. Rarely have there have been many people jailed for contempt of court proceedings. Obviously, I mean, Enoch Burke would be an example. He has spent a lot of time in prison because he refused to obey court orders. But in many cases, when contempt of court proceedings come before the court, certainly the fines can be issued, and that is often if people then purge their contempt. Fines can be issued as well if people effectively apologise to the court. So Enoch Burke would be different in that he was, brought to court for disobeying a court order, but has, continued to take the same stance effectively. Contempt of court proceedings also have been brought, for example, in relation to the Anna Creedle case, where the defendants who were granted anonymity because of their age, a number of people posted their names on social media, and that was regarded as being in contempt of court, and many of them face criminal proceedings and have gone through the courts again, and some of them might continue to go through the courts. So it isn't.
I'm just looking here on McCann Fitzgerald, one of the big solicitors firms here in Dublin, and they're talking about that the contempt of court. They're talking about the civil contempt and the criminal contempt, and I've explained what the difference is. And by way of what we heard today, the contempt or the scandalisation of the court they're talking about in the case of McGregor and Lawrence seems to fit into the criminal offence. So it says that the court has a number of ways of dealing with the person who may be in contempt of court. Attachment and committal. So there's an order to have a named individual arrested and brought before the court in order to answer the contempt, which has been alleged. And committal in order to arrest an individual and commit them to prison. This can be used as a coercive tool in order to encourage them to abide by the ruling, which they are in breach of, or in a punitive manner to express the court's disapproval of some particular behaviour. The courts have been clear there are limits to the use of imprisonment. Wasn't there something about it? There was a 7-day, there was...
Well, I mean, look, a lot of people, when they get the chance
but
to
they can
purge
also find, there is also an order for sequestrian, involves the court appointing a sequestrator over the assets of the offending person. So in other words, the court can order that they can be fined. So the conclusion in this document is that the law of contempt of court remains a creature of judge-made law. And while the rules around contempt may well remain described as amorphous, the actions required to avoid sanction by the court remain clear, abide by the orders made. So in other words, it's that's a law of the judge, isn't it? It's his court.
It's his court.
Or her court.
Yeah.
And they
make the decision.
They make the decision.
Exactly, effectively like a sentence. So you see, I suppose... let's look back on what happened there with McGregor and putting up these posts. It's really, really unusual in an Irish context. I mean, we don't see that much. People who lose cases like McGregor they rarely launch a full frontal attack on the court. However, we've seen it's a very common occurrence in the US. Donald Trump in particular, through all the court cases that he went through, even during those court cases, he was making social media posts and was actually fined during them. But American law is a totally different thing. They have a totally different balance. They have some sort of, in the Constitution, they have the right to free speech, and they tolerate a lot of commentary from both defence and prosecution in cases all the time. It's just a very different system. We also saw it with Andrew Tate. He has made comments on his cases. I don't know exactly what happens in Romania where he's facing charges, but it doesn't seem to have affected him greatly. So that's a kind of, they're the examples. Maybe they're the examples that Conor McGregor looked at and felt he could carry on in the same way. Certainly a lot of his life is spent in the US or dealing in the US, and he may have looked at cases in the US and felt this was appropriate and was going to be tolerated. But actually, Ireland is very, very strict on issues of contempt, even more so than the UK, which we share a similar basis of law. And we see here now that he has run into real problems. The judge has said he's not decided what he is going to do, but the fact that a criminal contempt court or the prosecution could be brought just shows you it's how serious it is. I think overall, though,
this whole case has been a total disaster for McGregor for every little bit along the way, hasn't it?
It has.
I mean, financially, look, we all know he's loaded, but I mean, there's still a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money,
It's a lot of money, and it's far-reaching implications for the future. Again, in effect, he's forced some of this judgment on the court. The judge's comments, as we know, what you can't be held in contempt of court for is repeating what is said in court. The judge has been very, very clear, and that'll be repeated forevermore against McGregor and now James Lawrence. You have to look at this. It's kind of really simple. There's so many legal complications, but the real simple thing is the judge has made clear Nikita Hand's version of events is 100% vindicated, not just through Conor McGregor, but also through James Lawrence. She has brought this case, the pressure on the young woman must be incredible. And we saw some of that in the aftermath of the trial.
And she spoke about initially when the criminal investigation was ongoing and there was no prosecution, being brought, her communication with the DPP was to suggest that the reason it wasn't brought was because this guy was so famous, you know? And in the aftermath of the civil case, and first of all, the reporting around the civil case was because he was so famous.
Yeah.
I mean, a case like that with two unknowns would never have made it across the world's media. And then in the aftermath of the case, he's so famous that he has a reach on his social media.
Yeah, and he has
millions and millions of people. And you saw all these people on social media reacting to his posting and what he had to say. And, you know, doing videos themselves without the facts, without the clear facts. So it's an ongoing thing for her, and his fame has been central to all of this.
Yeah, and it's an ongoing thing. There's obviously people, MMA fans and various other people, some of the people who admire Conor McGregor's stance on the immigration issue. A lot of them have taken McGregor's side, the fanboys as they're called. But again, this is another blow for that narrative. Nikita Hand has been, again, her story has been vindicated again, and, you know, more power to her, because, you know, if you think about the emotional impact of that trial, the emotional impact of even waiting for that verdict to be reached, that moment of victory, and instead of then being able to go home and put it all behind her, you have this, you know, these social media posts, and again, that narrative, and again, millions of people reading that she's a liar, and, you know, the jury didn't believe her. And again, the fullness of time, it's just not been borne out. And yeah, look, it's a real problem for McGregor. And as we said at the time,
I wonder, will he react to this?
Well, I don't think he will, actually. I don't think he's in a place to, because, you know, however powerful he is and however rich he is, as we know, the courts are way more powerful. And that's just the way it is. And when they talk about sequestering of assets...
Do you think he's a person who can be directed, who can be told what to do and what not to do by anyone?
Well, let's see. I mean, if he...
I've no doubt. I mean, in a million years, his lawyers wouldn't have suggested to him to lash out on social media. Like, no. There's no way he would have been...
So the sequestering of assets is what you mentioned, which is another...
And you have to say, even when they were deleted, when the sense prevailed and it was deleted too little, too late, because it'd been seen by so many people... You know, you'd like to think that was, and you would think that was on advice.
You would imagine.
Team.
Yeah, look, he's not getting advice.
Who are a really big and well-known and well-respected legal firm. But I mean, some people just cannot be directed.
They can't be.
They don't reflect on others because they just will not take advice or anything. They just go ahead and do whatever they want. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he reacts to this.
Well, I think you see that the sequestering of assets, as I said, like it's look, the newspapers get it, and you get told the editor could go into prison and the courts can seize all of the assets of the newspaper. So that's what sequestering means. So in theory, if somebody acts in contempt of court, in theory, the court could just take all his assets
that are in this country,
and seize them. Now, that's never going to happen. But that is the power of the state. And people like Conor McGregor are powerful in society, wealthy, have access to money and many other things. But they're simply not as powerful as the power of the state if you go against it. Like a lot of people who have a tendency towards bullying, let's see if he does, you know, I'd imagine he won't be that brave. That would be my opinion.
Well, let's wait and see. One way or another, he's back in court, is he? Or his legal team are back in court in January for
final hearing, and also an appeal hearing. So I suppose the case goes on.
Okay, thanks, Niall.
Thanks, Nicola.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs, and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.